Why good graphics don't matter.
There's always been an obsession with video game graphics ever since their inception, and as years have passed, graphical technology has improved as hardware has improved, naturally. And seeing the leaps in graphics since the early 2000s has been nothing but amazing to witness during my time as a gamer.
I think so too. I feel like people never talk about this, but some of the graphical updates, especially like whenever we first saw certain games, like WoW, like remember like old Blizzard cinematics? Bro, that shit was like a completely different world.
Over the last decade, graphical improvements began to mean much less. Comparing games from 2023 to 2013, I often find that not just a few, but a lot of those games from before 2013 still look better than the ones releasing in current year. Now certainly there are some noticeable improvements if you really focus on the textures and analyze the pixels.
Nobody cares about this. Yeah, nobody really gives a shit. Because like at that point, like graphics, this is what I think graphics do. Is they just level off. And to be honest, we hit this point years ago. This point was like, I'd say like 2010. Now, the graphics again, and if you look right here, this point is higher than this point. And the graphics have improved, right? Like you've got Unreal Engine 5. It is better, but it's just a little bit better. It's not like it's a big deal.
When comparing a modern game to one a decade old, but playing a game like Dishonored from 2012, or Bioshock Infinite from 2013, or even The Order 1886 from 2014,
yeah, these games look great.
If you didn't know any better, you'd think these games were new releases. They just don't look as dated as you might think for being 10 years old.
Yeah, they actually look really nice.
Despite the technology getting better since then, very few games can top these games, or even match them visually. So why is this? Well, like
the style. It's all about style. Like a lot of the Dark Souls graphics actually kind of suck. Like the fidelity of the individual pixels is very like shitty. Bloodborne is the best example of this. Bloodborne's awful, but the style. Everybody knows the style, and that's what matters.
All things, a tool is only as good as the one who wields it, and when in the right hands, modern game development tools can produce amazingly impressive results. But unfortunately, so many studios have been putting out games that, while graphically are impressive due to their technology that they're built with, end up looking like utter dog shit. A game like Forspoken has great graphics, but looks extremely generic and almost blinding in its visuals.
Well, you see this all the time, like with a lot of the Unreal 5 games. Like, have you guys ever seen some of these games that were made in Unreal 5? Like, I think the best example of this was the Quinfall, that had, like, a bunch of just pre-rendered assets put together like it looked like Atlantis. And it's like people were pogging over this, but the truth is that you can create this with almost no effort at all. Like, it's not like this was some sort of, like, expertly crafted place. It was just pre-rendered, assets being put in a world.
Washed out and ugly sort of way. Immortals of Avium, a game released just a few days ago running on Unreal Engine 5.
See, that's the game. Remember that game? How many viewers did that game have? I mean, it had dozens of viewers, right? It was like 70? Yeah, that's a lot.
Is graphically outstanding, but looks like an Unreal Engine...
Oh, wait a second. This was the game that I saw the trailer for and I said it was going to be garbage. I was right! Oh my god, I just realized that. I didn't even see it from that frame. Holy fuck. It already came out? We all knew. Yeah, it's not like I'm a fucking Nostradamus. I think anybody could have seen that. That wasn't difficult? No, I'm not a genius for picking this out. You're right.
An asset flip project, even though I know it isn't. The devs probably did work very hard on creating those assets, but it just doesn't come across that way. And it doesn't help that this game in particular is so visually bloated. Like, I love fast-paced games, but I can't tell.
This just looks like trash.
What the fuck is happening?
Like, this is fucking garbage. Like, what is this garbage?
On screen here. The visibility is just awful due to the graphical and artistic style they went for.
Yep.
While I understand that realistic graphics sell to the casual audience, I'm always looking towards companies that have a more distinctive art style instead, even if it is more low poly. Some wrongfully ascribe this generic look of video
I
games
love how people say like realistic graphics sells to a high audience or the most mainstream audience. Remember, the two most mainstream games in the last 10 years have been Minecraft and Fortnite. The fuck out of here. Like, bro, anybody trying to push that, there's no way.
to the Unreal Engine
Pokemon.
itself, but
Yeah.
just because a game is made in Unreal doesn't mean they have to look like this. I think
No.
Sea of Thieves is a great example of a game that takes advantage of the strengths that the Unreal Engine provides,
I didn't know
and
Sea of
is a
Thieves was
beautiful
in
game
Unreal.
in many regards. But it still has a distinctive art style that separates it from a game like, say, Atomic Heart. It's not the engine.
Yeah,
it's
see, I didn't play Atomic Heart because it just looked like it wasn't good. It just didn't look good.
how it's being used. Firewatch, a game made in the Unity engine, is another example of a game that's a visual treat, yet is not what I would consider AAA graphics. And to get to the main point here, I'm a strong believer that graphics don't really matter. To some degree, sure, but we've reached a point in the last
Graphics are sprinkles on a cupcake. They might make you want to buy the cupcake, but they don't really make it taste that much better. And you don't buy a cupcake because of the sprinkles either.
10 years, and especially in current year where graphics have mostly plateaued. So art style,
Ooh, have graphics plateaued? I feel like we keep getting better and better graphics. But it's like, really, I mean, they definitely, like, whenever you compare Super Nintendo to Nintendo 64 and Nintendo 64 to GameCube, like, these, like, were fucking massive, right? They were huge. But, like, I would say Unreal 5 and some of the demo engines that they've shown, like, these are, like, photorealistic settings. It's incredible. It is absolutely fucking amazing. Like that one game that was like the police body cam game that people were angry because they thought it was real. And that, yeah, unrecord. Yeah, it's fucking phenomenal how great the graphics are. But not everybody wants to play a hyper-realistic game.
is everything. And the fact that games from 10 to 15 years ago still hold up really well today is a testament to how true that statement is. Games like Rage from 2011 or Stalker from 2006
World of Warcraft.
still hold up incredibly well, and games like Fable or Dragon Age and Kingdoms of Amalur employ a timeless art style and visual style so they can be enjoyed for years to come.
Yeah.
2 years ago with the release of Elden Ring, there was some very strange rage bait online about Elden Ring having bad graphics.
It does. If you look very closely at a lot of the different items and NPCs and textures in Elden Ring, they are below the industry average for AAA games. And it doesn't matter. Because you don't care. This is what like these like game developer Andes don't realize. Is it doesn't matter how good your menu is, or how intuitive your UI is, or how many pixels a flower has on it, or how realistic garlic looks in the video game. People care about gameplay. People care about a good fucking experience. And yes, these things matter, but not really. It's the focus is totally fucking wrong in modern AAA games. I feel like most modern AAA games, and this is starting to change at least a little bit, what they focus on and what they care about is like stupid shit that like I think most actual real gamers don't care about. And that's why you keep seeing these like AA games and like, you know, indie games that are just completely outperforming these AAA games massively.
The graphics are dog shit.
Are you sure about that?
The graphics are dog.
Look at it though. Look at that water. Many games that came out on that same year have better quality water. Many games that came out that same year have better quality ground. And it doesn't matter because this one looks better visually appealing. It doesn't fucking matter. It's the style.
Shit. The graphics are dog shit. The graphics.
Look at the pixel count on the Moonlight Blade. Is the quality of this weapon anywhere near the quality of some of the other items in other like video games? No, I think that other video games have much more like higher fidelity items. They do. They have higher fidelity items. If you zoom in on that weapon, I can guarantee you that it's not going to look as good than if you zoom in on other weapons and other games that are equivalent to this, that were either made by other AAA studios. And you know what? It doesn't fucking matter. And that's what people see. Everybody is so focused on why Elden Ring actually has good graphics. They don't understand the difference between graphics and art style, and fidelity and design. The graphics and fidelity might not be a 9, but the art design and the style are an 11. That's the difference.
Hard dog shit.
But I'd take 100 different games with an art style half as good as what FromSoft delivered before another Atomic Heart, or Immortals of Avium, or Forspoken. And I do want to reiterate something I've mentioned in my past videos, and that's that these two things aren't
so true. This guy, bro, absolutely. I completely agree.
Mutually exclusive. You don't have to pick just one.
This guy
the game
really
can
gets
have
it.
both amazing graphics and an amazing art style.
Games with both amazing graphics and amazing art styles. Halo 1, Half-Life 2, World of Warcraft, 2004, Warcraft 3, BioShock, true. I would say probably the first Fallout. Skyrim for its time. I think that's good. Yeah. Witcher 3, yeah.
And even high visibility. I think games like BioShock and Dishonored perfectly encapsulate that. But even games like Doom 2016 and Eternal are great looking games. And a trick I recently learned about Doom Eternal is that the lighting on the enemies are separate from the environment, so they are always lit and clearly visible, even in darker areas.
Isn't it crazy that a game that's made off of gameplay and making gameplay important and the main focus, like, that's smart, right? Because, like, yeah, that makes it easier to see what's going on, because the gameplay is the focus.
This in turn makes the game look
really
less cinematic or realistic, but is much better for the gameplay Doom serves, and
Yes,
even the art
exactly.
style. The game director Hugo Martin said that during development for Eternal, they had at first made the lighting come from the environment, much like they did with Doom 2016.
You know what game also has environmental lighting? And it makes it harder to see what's going on? Diablo 4.
But in playtesting, it felt really bad because oftentimes you couldn't clearly see what it was that got you killed. And with Eternal being a much more punishing game and more fast-paced than 2016, visibility took precedent over realism.
There it
and
is.
I think what's really
Smart.
important to take away from that is visibility really matters in games. It
I
isn't
always felt like visibility in Apex kind of sucked, personally.
just Immortals that has this problem. It's a problem I and many others have with many different modern games.
Yeah, like I always had a problem seeing things in Apex. I don't know why. I never had this problem in like Warzone, like besides like that one like the like latex like rose skin, like it was like solid black. Besides that, I never had this problem in any other shooter.
Now, I primarily play PC on a 27-inch monitor like 4 feet from my face, yet oftentimes there are so many cases where it's almost impossible to see an enemy that's right in front of me. Why does it feel like everyone just blends into everything? Now, some might throw out the realism argument here again, and games going for a more military sim style or something like that should lean into the fact that it's hard to see enemies. And while I can understand that to a certain degree, seeing things in real life is much different than on a screen.
Yeah, it's just totally different. You're completely right. And also, like, I'm not in real life. I'm in a video game. So, like, whatever they do in a video game is gonna, like, I'm not, yeah, like, it's not real life.
Looking at a mountain range in real life versus a picture of that mountain range, your eyes can pick out much more things in person, whereas in a picture, you're going to lose a lot of detail because you just have captured a 3D environment.
Well, you don't have the one of the reasons why is that you don't have the depth perception. Like, looking at a monitor, monitors are good and, like, they become better at, like, you know, projecting depth, but it's not going to be like real life.
But on a 2D plane. And when you play video games, it's on a screen, which is essentially a picture. You aren't going to be able to see the same things on this mountainside in Battlefield 2042 compared to if you saw this mountain in person.
Yep.
I think back to the 2008 to 2012 era of FPS games, and the textures were a bit lower resolution, but the character models were often highly detailed, and it really made them stand out by having sharper objects on somewhat of a more blurry backdrop. This made it almost more akin to real life because your eyes can pick out an enemy a bit easier in those older games, especially at a distance. And funnily enough, you'll often see competitive FPS players cranking their graphics down in games in order to have a bit more of a competitive edge.
I think a lot of that is for FPS, like frames per second. But also, yeah, it removes a lot of the unnecessary, like foliage, you know? Like it's like there's two reasons for that. It's not just one thing.
Well, I don't think every game should look like BattleBit. It's been a lot of fun playing that game and having long-ranged engagements in my gameplay. You can actually see enemies from afar, or see someone when they peek out from the side of a building.
I'm gonna be honest, guys. I still think the best BR for long-range combat and ballistics is PUBG, and I don't think any video game has come close. I think PUBG just stands so far above everybody else for mid and long-range gameplay that it's not even remotely close. Tarkov, I don't play Tarkov, so I can't compare that.
It feels great to have some of that long-range gunplay in a Battlefield-style game again, like I did back in Bad Company 2.
Surprised you hit him.
I think one of the best examples of art style being more important than graphics, though, is with the PS5 Demon's Souls remake. I think in every...
Dude, the PS5 Demon's Souls remake was so good. It completely changed my entire perspective on remakes. Because, like, after the Warcraft 3 remake, I, you know, kind of lost hope in remakes until I played this.
Anyway, except for graphics, the remake is worse than the original. The atmosphere is much diminished, the art direction became more generic looking, and both the enemy designs and environments have been changed to go against the visual storytelling that the original did so successfully.
That didn't bother me.
And in turn,
I never played the original.
While Elden Ring doesn't have the graphical fidelity of the Demon's Souls remake, I think it's a far better looking game because of its incredibly strong art direction. Another example I've mentioned in the past is about the Destiny franchise, where there are many instances where... Another example I've mentioned in
It's Destiny 1.
The past is about the Destiny franchise, where there are many instances where Destiny 1 looks better than Destiny 2. The art direction and lighting of the sequel leaves the game feeling a bit more plastic than its predecessor. And while there is definitely some incredible visuals inside of Destiny 2 areas, it's when comparing places inside both games that you can really start...
That looks really nice.
To notice just how big of a drop-off there is in the sequel. Several shots on the Cosmodrome or the moon are noticeably uglier, and even in the reprised raids like King's Fall, great use of shadows and contrasting colors from the original are now washed out and missing detail in the sequel. Some of my favorite games visually are ones that use an almost cartoon aesthetic, like Overwatch, which has a very Pixar-esque look.
Yeah, Overwatch has a great style.
Games like Kingdoms of Amalur, or the Fable games, or a game like Alice Madness Returns. These games all hold up incredibly well today. Their visual designs have stood the test of time and can be played today without feeling too dated, due to the strength of the art direction and atmospheric design. Now some games have bad art style and bad graphics. I think Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are a pretty good example of that. Both graphically and artistically, they look like absolute shit. And that's not the Switch's fault. Sword and Shield on the Switch looks much better than Scarlet and Violet, and for some reason, the more 3D and open world the games have gotten, the worse the visuals and art direction.
I never really played a Pokemon game past 2006. I stopped giving a fuck about Pokemon whenever I went to middle school. So I really have no idea what Pokemon is like now.
It's both unfortunate and confusing because a game like Xenoblade Chronicles 3, a game also on the Switch, looks pretty good given the hardware, and I was hoping Pokemon's visuals would at least be somewhere in that ballpark by now, especially since it's clearly possible.
I don't know. Well, I mean, it's Nintendo, right? So, like, you know, the Nintendo Switch is as powerful as an Xbox 360. Or maybe less. So, yeah, you've got to just understand it. It's Nintendo. It's a GameCube, yeah.
Every time I hear a studio try to sell their game and their focus is on how cinematic or photorealistic it is, I usually just check out. The industry spends so much time trying to make games realistic without remembering that games should focus more on the gameplay and its art direction.
This is what I was saying. Like, he's completely fucking right. Like, absolutely. No, I don't give a fuck about how, like, her hair. Like, I don't care about this. Like, maybe this gets people to buy the game, but it certainly doesn't get people to play it. Or at least it doesn't get me to play it. I just don't care about this stuff at all.
It's like they say, Every time a game developer brags about how cinematic their game is, an angel loses its wings. I care much less about a world that looks ultra-realistic and more about a world that feels realistic, with a clear, cohesive art direction and world building through its environmental storytelling. And I think sometimes people confuse themselves into thinking a game that looks realistic is more immersive, but I think that has very little to do with making a game immersive.
I don't think that, I think that having great graphics does make it easier to be immersed in a game, definitely. But I think having graphics that have a feel of escapism does that even more. Like, I think it's hard to become immersed in a game like Starfield because of how bad the characters look. And I think also Lost Ark had this issue. Because Lost Ark was designed in Unreal 3, the other opposite 5. It was designed in Unreal 3, and it looks like it. It looks like dog shit. And like every time they do a close-up to a character's face in Lost Ark, I just cringe. Because it just looks so fucking bad.
It's more about believability. Do the visuals, sound design, music, and tone of the game mesh well? If so, then that's all that's needed to immerse someone.
Yep.
Going back to Atomic Heart for a second, I think a big reason why it failed to immerse me is despite its impressive visuals graphically, the game's tone and art direction feels very generic, and it pales in comparison to BioShock at every turn. And I make the comparison to BioShock.
Well, also, like, another reason why I think matters, like, I bet this guy is an American. So BioShock has a lot of references to American, like, idealism, right? Like the 50s and stuff like that. Whereas Atomic Heart is doing it off of, like, Soviet and like, Russian shit. So, like, there's not that intrinsic understanding that you, like, there's not a cultural understanding in the same way. I think that matters.
Because obviously it was a very clear inspiration, and is often
I wonder what people in like in Russia and like the places around that, I wonder what they feel about this game, if they liked it or not.
Compared to BioShock, but in Atomic Heart, the Unreal Engine technology is all that's selling that game, because the story, the gameplay, and the atmosphere feels pretty uninspired, which is unfortunate. It's a game that otherwise could have been really interesting, if helmed and directed by the right talent. Sometimes I look at games from 2014 and 2015 and think that visuals peaked back then. There's of course exceptions to that in recent years, but I think it's a bit wild that Assassin's Creed Unity from 2014 somehow still has more striking visuals and lighting than the newer games. The Order 1886, despite being a fairly average game, looks absolutely amazing.
I think lighting and shading matters a lot, and I think that, like, once you have... Like, have you ever seen, like, for example, like, some of the WoW things, and, like, without the right lighting and shading, they look like garbage, but, like, actually in-game, they look amazing?
Much better than a lot of Unreal Engine titles in recent years. Dying Light 1 looks more impressive than its sequel. Even Far Cry 4 has more attention to detail than Far Cry 5, with 4 having much more lively environments versus the more static ones of 5.
Well, it's because this is all washed out with bloom. Look at that.
Battlefield 1's destructibility and details beat out 2042, and it's not even close. Infamous Second Son, Arkham Knight, these games still outshine games 8 to 9 years later visually. The graphical technology and more high-res textures are doing a lot of the heavy lifting for modern AAA developers because somehow we keep seeing regressions in so many different areas over the years. It's not just the visuals, but the animations too, but I'll save that for another day. Environmental storytelling is the most effective way to tell a story and immerse us in a world. Humans are visual creatures, and exposition dumping is often a big turnoff. This doesn't mean that dialogue or even some exposition is a bad thing.
Thank you. One thing that is the biggest cockblock in a new game to me is whenever... Okay, finally! Now we can talk to you for 30 minutes about something that you have no frame of reference or understanding about and will immediately forget the second that this screen is over. Okay, good. Now talk to this other guy. He's got 10 more minutes for you. Like, Wayfinder was like that. Yeah, I just, like... I don't know. I really appreciate games that allow you to play the game. And then you slowly learn more about the game over time. Yeah, it's a book, man.
Far from it.
Jesus.
But it's important to make sure that the visuals speak for themselves, and the dialogue and exposition service the visuals, rather than the other way around. I think a game like Firewatch does this almost perfectly, and I plan to cover that in a future video, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss that one. Thank you guys for watching. Leave your thoughts on the discussion of art style versus graphics in the comments section, and I'll see you all in the next one.
What a great video. Like, I'm so glad I watched this. This is amazing. Like, this was such a good fucking video. Like, I'm pretty much, I agree with, like, every single thing that he said. Remnant was really cool. Yeah, Remnant was the same thing. Like, Remnant had great style, but, like, even though the graphics weren't, like, super high quality, it was very easy to understand what was going on, and you could appreciate what was happening. So, yeah, I mean, I just think that good graphics also, like, I don't know what's happened with some of these AAA studios recently. I think Starfield is, like, Starfield is the best example of this. How is it possible that a AAA studio, after 7 years or 6 years of development, produces that? How does that happen? It's honestly just kind of sad. Do video games have directors like movies have directors? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I mean, there's a game director, but he's directing in, like, a different way. Then there's, like, people that design, like, obviously they're doing storyboarding, etc. So, yeah, I don't know the nuances to it, but I think that some yes, some no. But, yeah, I mean, I just don't understand, like, how you develop a game like Starfield or, like, I'm trying to think of some of the other, like, really big games that have come out recently that are just, like, kind of mediocre. Like, how do you do that? How do you fuck up on that level? But, yeah, I think that he's right about graphics, like, and the fidelity of graphics. Like, the actual, like, pixel count of certain things. But being lower with these old games, but the games look better because they have a more definitive style that's more appealing. I'll link you guys the video. There's a creative director. Yeah, there you go. Starfield looks embarrassingly rough. Yeah. Failure to innovate, Bethesda is stuck in their own ways and refuse to evolve. Yep. Starfield is fine. You just don't like it. You not liking the game doesn't mean it's bad or a failure in most cases. Okay, well, I mean, you liking the game doesn't mean it's good either, so, I mean, I could just use that same argument. Like, the NPCs in the game are garbage. They look stupid, the story is boring, the gameplay sucks, it's super repetitive, you have a loading screen for every activity, you do the same things the entire game, you have the same 5 guns and 3 of them are bad. Like, look, bro, like, play it all you want, enjoy it all you want. If you like the game, that's fine. But if you want to eat shit, stop trying to convince me that it's chocolate. Just eat shit.